everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Cross the Pitch with myself, Dave Miller, and to my right or left, however you look at it, is Jose Nunez. Jose, welcome back again. You're becoming a bit of a regular on the show at the moment. How you doing?
I'm doing well. You guys will never get me to leave, whether you like it or not. If anything, I'll continue to advocate to be the third chair, the rotating chair. Love it every single time I'm here. You guys are wonderful. And interestingly enough, I went to a Union game shortly after my last appearance, and someone was very quick to notice it and say hello. So it's
Oh, yeah,
it's
awesome.
it's fun. It's fun. I'm glad to be here.
Listen, we're not only gaining recognition amongst ourselves, but also getting you more recognition amongst the Union faithful. So, obviously, it's great to hear. Obviously, unfortunately, tonight Mike's not on the show. He touched upon it, and I tweeted about it earlier. He's obviously off with illness, so wish you all the best, Mike. He is, sat behind in the producer's chair tonight, just overseeing us to make sure we don't get into too much trouble. But I think we should be able to take care of ourselves. Before we dive into all things Union, we'll quickly kick off with our sponsors. So the first one is Manscaped at manscaped.com. Put in the code AATBirds for 20% off and free shipping. And then at Statement Games, sign up to statementgames.com for a fun, free new look at fantasy sports. And then obviously oddsjam.com, an arbitrage calculator, and more. Never lose a bet again if you sign up to oddsjam.com/AATBirds. And then we have a new partnership with Triple Threat Bets. I believe Mike has done some work with them before. And you can visit them at triplethreatwagers.com for everything college basketball. And obviously, one of our newest sponsors is Vinny's Pizza and Restaurant in Allentown, PA, serving Italian cuisine, including pizza, pasta, burgers, sandwiches, and more. Available for pickup or delivery, so order today at vinnyspizzas.com. And obviously, before we kick off, we have to look at also our very own shop, aatsportsnetwork.com/shop. You can get all things AAT Sports or AAT Birds content. Obviously, Johnny does a great job designing a lot of the shirts, and so obviously just take a look and see across the pitch gear, chips and dip gear, the weekly podcast, anything that's related to AT Birds or AT Sports. You can look there for all merch. And obviously, Jose, well, sort of dive into the Union. Obviously, looking back at the game last Sunday against Nashville, I believe obviously you were, as I said, you were a man on the ground looking at the game. It was the first ever game in Nashville's new stadium, and it was the Union that scored the first ever goal in the new stadium, but they weren't able to come away with the 3 points after conceding a very late goal. For you, obviously, a game, sort of 50-50 game, really, a game that the Union would be happy to come away with the point. Mikel Uhre scored his first goal, but looks a bit fragile at times and frustrating not to, see out the game.
Yeah, no, I think it was an awesome game to watch. Sure, I tried my best to tweet along with the game, but with the 2-year-old and my mom visiting after being away for a while and grilling a little bit, I was watching through the window from the deck into the TV and tweeting as much as I could while the little man was trying to get his hands on the grill, which of course is a big no-no since that thing's piping hot. So, a couple of points from the game that I found really interesting. Our fans. Man, unreal level of support from the Union faithful out to Nashville. When I sit at 140 and look across the stadium to that lonely corner that often is the away supporter section, it was the complete opposite from our Union fans. Just about every single face that I see through Union Twitter was there, which was awesome. It was awesome to see that section packing and rocking, and really all the pictures that everybody shared were incredible, which leads me to my second point. That stadium, what a beautiful stadium. 30,000 seater, I think it is. From all angles that ESPN had of that match, just an absolute beautiful pitch, absolute beautiful facility. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if in some way, shape, or form that stadium hosts something in the future, maybe through CONCACAF or maybe even through FIFA qualifiers. If not, who knows what 2026 brings? I don't know if it's too late for Nashville to be part of a bid for hosting a city. I don't know if 30,000 is enough, but nonetheless, a beautiful facility. You touched on it, Dave. Uhre, finally, glad to see him score. And frankly, it was beautiful to watch him spin Walker Zimmerman like a top. To think that that is the starting center back for the United States does not give me a lot of hope when they go to Qatar this November, though I hope I'm wrong for all of the Americans who watch this. I'm sort of impartial since I'm Bolivian, and certainly they're not making the World Cup anytime soon. So I sort of ally myself with Brazil, the next closest. But Walker Zimmerman was just really caught out of position there. And Dave, I know you are a FIFA Ultimate Team player, fan, savant, whatever you want to call it. But Mikel Uhre, with that pace, just outrunning everybody from a beautiful Gastag ball. But, what can we say? We can't praise Uhre without praising Andre Blake, who probably had his best game, if not second best game of his life, almost kept us to a win, considering how close he was to saving that PK. And ultimately, we just had chances. We had so many chances. I watched the 7-minute highlights that Google puts together for you if you type in the game on the search engine. And we had countless shots that were either blocked or deflected, or the keeper right at the keeper, with Carranza having one, for example, in the first half. Just we had chances. And Dave, you as an English football watcher, and myself following the Premier League, the way that you typically win championships, unless you have a Manchester City and Liverpool, you win at home and you tie away. And to get a tie at a park like that with all of that emotion going on, a home opener, stadium opener, fans screaming and rocking, I think that, sure, the Union might be disappointed to have held on and give up the lead with a silly penalty that I think Martinez, I don't understand what the hand's doing up there in that position. But nonetheless, you tie away from home, you win at home, and you're more than likely going to win a championship in a regular league that doesn't have a playoff. But nonetheless, that's the way to do it. So long-winded way to say I'm satisfied considering how brutal this May is. So I don't know about your thoughts after watching maybe some highlights or reading some highlights yourself.
Obviously, I kept up to date on Twitter during the game. It was good to see. Obviously, I got the point. But I think, as you said, especially in this league and the way, again, I've touched upon it with Mike. It's one of the hardest. It's one, as you said, this is probably the most, apart from obviously like Mexico and South America. These are sort of leagues where you have to win your home games if you want to be competitive, because it's so hard to win on the road. Not only is it hostile, the climate, the weather, sort of everything. There's so many different factors that play into things, which, again, so many teams become acclimatized to their home area, and that's why the Union do so well with where they are in the conference that they're in, because they've got so many teams within the vicinity of their area, like New York, New England, Toronto, teams around that area, even like Chicago, that they're literally like a 3-4 hour journey away. So again, it's sort of they're not really having to go into a different environment. So that's why you see that obviously what's in the Union. They go out and beat the Red Bulls, or go out and beat NYCFC, but then when you see they have to go to Nashville, they'll have to go to LAFC this weekend, Orlando. That's where things start to get difficult. The long traveling, the complete contrast in weather, the complete contrast in like weather conditions and climate, and playing at different sea levels and things such as that. That's where it becomes so difficult in the MLS. But I think, again, I agree with the point. Is win your home games, you get results on the road, and that sort of sets you up for success. I think the Union are one of those teams where you can liken them to an English team or like an Atletico Madrid, where they will stifle their opponents. They'll try and take the atmosphere out of the game. You can see it with players like Jose Martinez, and Sergio Santos. They probably are the two players that do it best, is where they go down, they try and cause disruption in the game. They try and take the sting out of the game, try and take the crowd out of the game by causing a lot of stoppages and trying to get, somewhat rile up the crowd. And I think that does help them. I think that has played a big part in the Union's success over the last couple of years. But yeah, I think, again, to go on the road in a game like that as well. And I think it was either you or Mike who tweeted, has the opposing team ever been like the first team to ever score like the first like competitive goal? I don't know in the MLS, but I remember when Arsenal opened up the Emirates, I think Olaf Melberg was the first goal scorer there. Obviously, Brentford's new stadium. I'm not sure I've been to Brentford's new stadium, but that's sort of the most memorable one for me. But I think, again, I'll sort of repeat myself. I agree with the point that you sort of said. Like, it's a satisfactory point if you look at things all around who are scored. Andre Blake still showed just how great he is, but again, there's a bit of fragility in there. Nashville at times were on top, and I think looking at the reactions on Twitter, that they really did sort of dominate that first half. They were the team on top, really testing Andre Blake. And I think the biggest save he made was the one from like 3 yards out, where he somehow managed to like push. I don't even know how he did it. Just somehow managed to get any contact on the ball to push it out over the bar. And I think there's a big point for the Union. And again, I think as well, someone that watched the game, and as you said, you watched the highlights. Were there any sort of moments in that game which sort of stood out to you in terms of maybe something that a weakness or strength that the Union need to either build upon, or something they really need to improve?
We you're a footballer. I'm a footballer. We've played. I still play at a relatively okay. Certainly not gonna say high, but an okay
Yeah,
level. And man, we have attacking options, but they're just not clicking yet. And it's becoming really frustrating considering that first half when Carranza had that clear chance that went straight to the keeper. And I think a follow up one that went wide that, you put one of those in early into that game and you just deflate that entire stadium within the first 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of the match. We
yeah,
may have a different story, though. Again, we can't get greedy considering just how emotional that game was for the guys in yellow of Nashville. So kudos to them. Beautiful facility. I'm glad we were able to spoil the party in a way.
yeah,
But we now look at what is going to be an even more grueling May. So if that performance is anything to go off of, I think we will be okay. I know it wasn't a win,
yeah,
but it was a hard fought tie that I think could have gone either way, considering what you mentioned, and it's obviously right. It was just the pendulum of attack, back and forth, back and forth. So we'll see. I know
yeah.
we're going to talk about what's coming up in the next few weeks, but yeah, I mean, not much more to say other than what did Jim have to say earlier this week?
I was going to say, quickly just touching upon, obviously, as you said, like a new 30,000 seat stadium in Nashville. I think it's a great indication for how much the game's grown in America as well. I mean, even say 5 years ago, you get a lot of people go, it's two stops. No, ironic with the NFL and things like that, but it's two stop start. I can't watch a game that ends 0-0 and one team draw, they both draw, and there's no winner. But now you sort of see, like, obviously Nashville, who are quite a new franchise, they obviously built a good fan base up and are selling out a 30,000 seat stadium. Charlotte, for their first ever season, they've managed to sell out the fan. Well, obviously, they've managed to get a packed house in the Panther Stadium. Atlanta have done a good job of selling out the Falcon Stadium as well. The game's growing. Austin FC, they've grown a fan base. LAFC, they're growing their own fan base. And although they might be seen as a brand, but it's still great to see so many options out there for Americans to support their own sort of local team. And we're also seeing it in the USL as well. So I think it's a great sort of indication for the way the game's growing, especially with 2026 on the horizon.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I must admit that we got to be careful with the Charlotte comparison. They're having a lot of issues, and we had Dave from the Mint City Collective on a couple of weeks ago, I think, while you were away,
Yeah,
and wonderful man, wonderful guy. We thoroughly defeated their team, but ultimately, I think they're having issues with their tickets. They're having some really, really tough situations with the pricing for their tickets that I think the fans are not feeling great about what the team is doing. So just a little bit, just to be a little bit mindful of that comparison. Maybe
yeah,
not
absolutely.
not the best one to make, but ultimately, you're right. My God, that's a beautiful facility. And it makes me wonder what's going on with Chester, what's going on with Subaru. And a big proponent, I'm a big proponent to not build without actually having the bodies to fill it. I much rather have
Yeah,
a stadium that holds 13, 15, 17,000 strong than have a stadium that's going to host 35,000 but only 20 show up. It's just not going to feel the same as it
yeah,
does currently at Subaru Park. So it does beg the question, are we trying to run the clock in Philadelphia? It's been 10 plus years at this point and no additions to the stadium. Was that ever part of the plan? Was that something that should have happened already? It makes you wonder a little bit.
yeah,
Are we waiting for the lease to end and hopefully something open up down Broad Street over by the sporting complex? Who knows? But yeah, beautiful facility and
yeah.
eager to see this budding rivalry with Nashville continue to grow.
Yeah. I think again as well, like the Nashville was not like a Red Bulls or NYCFC sort of rivalry. It's more of a friendly rivalry. I think more like both teams have sort of the admiration for each other and realise It's more like a competitive rivalry where both teams always push each other. We've seen that in every single game both teams have played, and again last night just sort of last week's where exemplified that. And obviously looking at Jim's press conference from earlier in the week which was Wednesday. Obviously, I just released an article today, sort of looking back at some of the quotes that he made, um, you know, throughout the press conference. And again, I think he's very much, I think we say every week, Jim's doesn't like to give too much away with his press conferences in a sense. Like he doesn't, he doesn't like to, I don't know, having locker room sort of like it's like locker room quotes where he makes a quote and the manager goes, "Okay, fine, we'll stick that on the big board, and there's your inspiration for the game, lads. There's your motivation." Do you know what I mean? He keeps his cards close to his chest. He's obviously always very full of praise for the opposition, but I think it was this press conference at times was a bit nostalgic for Jim because I don't know if you view it the same, but he views this. The last time, obviously, the Union played LAFC was the game right before COVID, which was the 3-3 draw. Jack and Glasnez's free kick, sort of the Brendan Aronson coming out party. Jose Martinez made his first ever start for the Union as well in that game, and Jim sort of really did look back at it, and he sort of said in his press conference, uh, this is the quote. In a weird way, it kind of put our franchise into some real forward momentum. It was a really important game in our brief history, as strange as that sounds. I still love talking about this game because it was a crazy game for a lot of reasons. It was really entertaining on national TV and a great LAFC team. For us, we were kind of newish and still had a lot of unknowns. People knew that Andre Blake was great, but didn't know who Jacob Glasnes was. But I think he kind of put us on the map with the goal he scored. Brendan Harrison was still an up-and-coming player, but in that game, he played as fearless as anybody and made a name for himself. He also went in and spoke about Jose Martinez making his debut due to injuries on the league minimum, a young lad on the league minimum who'd never really played before, and how he rose to the occasion, and then sort of ended it by saying, I think it's put us on the map more than people realise, and led to us ultimately starting that run to win the Support Shield. Do you sort of agree with that sentiment from Jim that this was the sort of game that not only did this franchise need to sort of give it a kick up the arse, but it really, allowed sort of gave players the recognition and confidence to go on?
Oh my gosh, I can't agree any. If I could agree 1,000%, I would. On a personal side, this game is kind of emotional for me because I remember staying up. And 6 days later, my son was born.
Yeah.
So I was having some sleepless nights with a lot of anxiety because at any moment my son could be popping out. So luckily I was able to distract myself with a Union game.
Yeah.
But somewhere in between the birth of my son and this game, the world, not just the United States, the entire world came to a screeching halt. And I remember it
Yeah.
moment by moment watching the Glasnes goal. And I think this, if I'm remember correctly, this is where Martinez, you're right, had his debut, but he also had that slide tackle where a boot caught him in the face and he ended up bleeding from his lip. And it really gave me that, holy shit, this guy's serious. He is as gritty as it gets. So it was a good start for what he has become, which is very much a almost like a pop culture icon within the Union faithful, with being that this guy who will fight anybody and anything to represent the Shield. But yeah, it's interesting. Glasnes was an unknown figure. Martinez was, this guy who was just coming on. And you're right, Brendan Aronson was just finding his legs before moving over to Austria. So sure, he had a season or so before, with spectacular performances as a sub and whatnot. But yeah, I think this was really the game that set him in motion to become what we are now. And obviously 2020 being the year of the Supporter Shield, if I'm remembering correctly. It certainly was what just put everything into high gear for the Union development. And I think that game alone was really what cemented the phrase "in Ernst we trust," because those purchases of Glessens and Martinez really shined, not just
Yeah.
that day, but for the following months and obviously years at this point.
Absolutely. I think those were the sort of game. Those are the sort of games you want to win, but they sort of create folk heroes and things such as that. And obviously, the Glasnow's goal. Ironically, we've seen two goals that are probably two times better than the one that he scored there. Obviously, with the stunning goal in Atlanta last year, and then the half volley in the playoff game in the last second against the Red Bulls. But again, obviously, Jim again sort of said like it's a busy week. As we know, they've got to play in LA, then they've got to travel down to Orlando for the Open Cup, and they go back to Subaru Park to play the Red Bulls. But Jim sort of said like their full focus is on this game, and then as soon as they finish the game, they're going to travel straight from LA to Orlando, and the Union will attack the Open Cup game seriously, and they'll have a strong team out. But I think again as well, the again it's sort of an unsort of we saw it a lot last year due to the CONCACAF Champions League. But there was a lot of midweek games last year, so the Union were playing 3 games a week, and I know a lot of people weren't too happy about that. But Jim, this is something that Jim openly admit that he relishes because it's part and parcel of the game. It happens all over the world. You'll see it in England, you'll see it in Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, everywhere. You'll see teams play 3 games a week if it's Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, or whatever. Everyone does it. So I think Jim's just sort of saying like, there's no sort of reason to look at it and think it's crazy. It's the excuse. It's not an excuse to make if they end up getting 1 point and they lose the other two or something like that. It's sort of more of a challenge. I think importantly, I think this will be the sort of week that we might look back upon at the end of the season and say, as not a season defining week, but a week that you might look back upon and go, that was the week either, that was the week that sort of solidified them as contenders in the playoffs or support Shield, or look back at it, they got knocked out in the Open Cup, they've struggled, like they come fourth or fifth place, or whatever. You go, that might have been the week that we sort of should have realised they weren't as good as we thought they were.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what we come out of this. Obviously, we you guys previewed it. I think we were starting to think about it well before the season even started. And we knew the schedule that May was going to be very, very hectic. I think the U.S. Open Cup obviously throws a wrench into it all, but ultimately, I really do like Jim's sentiment of one game at a time. Throw all your eggs into the basket one game at a time. And frankly, we have a deep squad. We have a Bueno on the bench. We have an Aronson on the bench. We have a Sullivan on the bench. I mean, I can just keep on going down the bench and really what is becoming the Union too, who are
Yeah,
putting up some incredible performances. The players are, not the cameraman who is really botching those games if you tune in live. But overall, I think we can figure it out. I think the U.S. Open Cup is usually seen for MLS teams as a development tool. So some teams that maybe are already having a tough time with the league will use it as putting all their eggs in that basket.
yeah,
But we'll see. I'm excited. I think this will be a defining week, but I don't think it's the ultimatum week. I don't think that this will be a make or break considering all the points that they already have gathered from what I would consider a very strong start, which obviously has been
yeah,
historic. Um, but man, I know maybe I'm walking it back a little bit, but how sweet would it have been to walk away from Nashville with an additional 2 points going into an LA game like this
yeah,
one, an Orlando match that is a U.S. Open Cup match, and then a rivalry game against the Red Bulls at home? How sweet would it have been to have an additional two so then you can maybe tie one, lose one, and not feel as bad?
no, yeah,
And worst comes to worst, you lose both. Those additional 2 points could probably feel a lot sweeter had it not been for that penalty kick.
yeah. I think again, I think those are always the moments you look upon. You're always happy in those sort of situations to get a point when you look at it and you go, if that moment didn't happen, we'd have had all three, or if that could have just gone there, like Carranzo just hit the target. Do you know what I mean? I think you always look at those sort of things with happiness, like not happiness, but you always with satisfaction. Like, I'm happy with the point, but then you obviously then look back at it. There's always that regret or frustration that we could have gotten more. But again, I think, as you said, I mean, as Jim obviously said as well in his press conference, the first thing we want to focus on is obviously LAFC because it's a massive game, and I touched upon it in my article. This is the first time the Union have actually travelled to the West Coast since that LAFC game, the 3-3 draw. Because obviously, since COVID's happened, they've played teams in the Western Conference, but Nashville's sort of more down south. They played Portland at home, and Minnesota's up north, sort of western central up north, so it's near Canada. So I mean,
I was guessing that. I remember thinking about that, like, is this the first time they've been back to the West Coast since the LA game that I still call it the my son's name is Raphael. I call it the
Yeah,
pre-Raphael blip, kind of like an Avengers type of thing, right? With the
yeah,
Thanos snap where, but yeah, no, that's a crazy factoid, I guess. Just yeah, my God, I these last 2 years have been wild, obviously, as a first
yeah.
time dad, and having the union to kind of have as a reprieve to, forget about things, and or, the craziness that comes from having a baby. But yeah, that's wild that this is the first time. If anything, I think Jim would consider himself very fortunate.
Yeah. I think again. I mean. I think I was speaking to Mike. Obviously, we said mentioned it at some point last year. Like it's a weird thing to look at. I mean, obviously, COVID's been such a horrible time for a lot of people. But I think the way the union might look at it as, I, I don't know how to look at it. I think did COVID sort of it did. I think the union did look at it as something that sort of helped kickstart their great run. I mean, they did an incredible job in the MLS's back cup to get that far and play as well as they did. Do they have that sort of momentum going into the MLS if there's no COVID and that sort of competition doesn't exist to give them that extra level, that extra sort of recognition that they perhaps didn't have as well before? Because I think again the MLS is back cup was shown globally. It wasn't just a sort of one time event. It was shown globally. Games weren't played. Games were sort of spread out, so every single game could be watched. And then obviously you take that form into the what's it called? Into the MLS season the following year. Yes, we know the schedule's heavily sort of skewed for all the teams. Union mostly played in the Northeast, like playing the Revs like 100 times and everything else.
Felt that way.
Yeah. Uh, do you know what I mean? So again, does the Union sort of run? Not. I mean, it's a hard. Me and Mike sort of discussed it. Does the union's run probably doesn't happen without the situations that COVID brought them as well. So I think the last 2 years have been a wild ride. I think again they've managed to sustain and they've managed to stay level with sort of the rise and the bounce that they've had, which is obviously great to see. And Ernest is obviously doing a fantastic job to sort of capitalize on it. He's not just letting Kasper Shabirko go and getting in a striker like a CJ Sapong level striker. I just about CJ Sapong. Do you know what I mean? He's not going out and finding that sort of mid to lower tier forward. He's going out and finding the next level, like Mikel Uhre, looking in like a project player that has the potential and the ability there, like Jordan Carranza. So I think again, everything the last 2 years has obviously been filled with a lot of sadness. Everything's going on in the world, but again, for the Union, they've managed to ride the wave that they've sort of created themselves and making the best out of a worst case situation. So I think it's been an incredible 2 years to see. And I think as we were discussing for the podcast, I think it's brought so many people joy in such a dark time, and it's allowed people to have a welcome distraction and watching their team do well, which is obviously great to see.
If you would have told Jose 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, that the Union would be, hovering between first and third place over the last couple of years, and the roster that we have these last couple of years, I would tell you that you're bollocks. That's nonsense. There's no way, absolutely no way. I would bite my arm off for
Yeah,
that, right? And here we are. Who would have ever guessed that we would have figured it out, right? When we have had such tumultuous years where we're barely making playoffs, and if we do, we're a one and out, bounce out type of thing. So
yeah,
I know that obviously last year being our best run in the playoffs and whatnot, that aside, I think it's a culture of winning, and whether that came from COVID or not, that's something that the Philadelphia Union and its fans has to be really, really thankful for and proud
yeah,
about, I should say. So hopefully to many more years where this is the standard, right? First, second, third place all throughout the year. We lock ourselves into a nice spot for the playoffs, and who knows? We're competing in CONCACAF Champions Leagues again. Maybe we're
yeah,
running deep into the U.S. Open Cup and representing Philadelphia proudly. So we'll see. But until then, we just gotta focus on this Wednesday coming up
yeah.
after tomorrow late in the evening. I think I'll be able to make it throughout
No,
most
that's
of that
right.
match.
I mean, for me, I think it should be easy for me because soon I work nights, so when I finish work, it's like 2 a.m. US time, so it should be. should be light work for me. But I mean, look, I mean, again, obviously looking at LAFC, they're of course they're top of the Western Conference. That's sort of what Jim built it to. Like, it's exciting to see the two best teams in either conference going battling out. They've across 9 games, they've got 22 points. The Union have got 18. So again, there's a win and a draw split between the two. Um, I think again, looking at LFC sort of run this LAFC's run this season, but I think did they lose an opening day? I think they may have lost like the first game of the season. I just want to
Yeah, they
verify
did.
that. Yeah, they lost their first game of the year, and then since then they've been on a great run. It again, obviously, it's going to be a very tough game. I think we all know. I'm sure. Obviously, you probably noticed it as well. Me and Mike discussed it every single week. The Union's away day curse last year, where I think they went like almost a year without winning a game on the road, bar like winning one road game against. I think they beat all they. I'm trying to think the game it was. They won a game on the road, and then didn't win another one for like 8 or 9 months,
Yeah, they
bar the
kept on
one in
tying or
Cincinnati.
losing, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
So again, it's going to be a difficult game to sort of see how. Again, this might be a good indication to sort of see how the Union are doing. Because I mean, again, they've just gone to Nashville, got the point. Can they then back that up and get another road point, or can they even go in there and cause a shock and shit house all 3 points? I think LAFC are going to be no grouches. I mean, they've played some very good teams this year, and the whole discussion of the Western Conference is better than the Eastern Conference is obviously always going to plague whatever discussion they have on sort of the legitimacy of which team is best in terms of support shield rankings. But you as I think we'll both probably agree, Carlos Vela is probably the star man for LAFC that we'll have to watch out for.
Yeah, he's gonna be a pain in the rear. I think of we have wonderful players in that of Glesnes and Elliott, and Kai Wagner's no slouch, and that entire backline's great and has done wonderful things. If not, if I remember correctly, best goals allowed in the East with only 6, if I remember correctly. I looked at that stat
Yeah,
before we jumped on, so hopefully I'm not dyslexic or forgetting. But ultimately, a great defensive line. But we have not faced a Carlos Vela. We have
no,
not faced probably the best striker in MLS just yet, and this is going to be a true test. And I must admit, you know, Minnesota held them down for 83 minutes their last match. Can the Union do that for a full 90 and walk out
no,
of there with a tie? And I think it goes without saying, considering the hellish week that they're about to have, and we touched upon it a little bit ago. You and I and Mike and everybody wearing the blue and gold would probably be thrilled to walk out of LA with a point, let
yeah,
alone 3. Though I must admit, there is no way we can get into a 3-3 shootout. I don't think that we have
no,
that in us. There's absolutely no
no.
way unless magically Carranza and Uhre blend together and Gazdag is walking out of there with 3 assists or
Yeah.
4 assists on the night.
Well, I mean, I think again, obviously, we're starting to see the Daniel Gazdag that people thought they'd see when he first joined the union. Of course, I think people take it into consideration, like how hectic that period was for him. He just completed a full season in Hungary to then essentially moving straight over to America and sort his visa, relocate, everything about his life, learning a new language, acclimatizing to a new league, a new country, everything. And I think again, that's always going to take time for a player to adjust, especially coming off the back of a lengthy season and then obviously preparing for the Euros as well. I think a lot of people didn't really take that into consideration last year, and now it's clear that he's become accustomed to the league. He's become accustomed to the Philadelphia, the team, the way that Jim wants to play, and we're starting to see the best Daniel Gazdag, or the best out of Daniel Gazdag, which we were hoping to see when he first joined.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. One more battle that I'm thinking about during this match, Dave, is what Acosta and Martinez, what that battle is going to be like. You have
Rough.
yeah, you have probably the best number 6 in the league, and that of Martinez, barring some weird penalties and I would say that he's very lucky to not have gotten a red card yet this season, and
Yeah,
we're very, very early in the season against who is probably going to be a starting player for the United States out in Qatar. I think that's going to be a very interesting battle for us to follow along. And sure,
yeah,
we spoke miles about Carlos Vela and that interesting, matchup that he's going to force between all four, because he's not going to stand still and run at Glesnes and run at Elliott. I think Wagner's going to get a taste of him, and
Yeah,
anybody, and Harriel. I think he will be pointing at Harriel and saying, all right, young buck, you and I are going
yeah,
to go at it for 20, 30 minutes before I move on to the next of you. So I think the Acosta and Martinez battle will be very interesting and very telling of the way this game's going to go. Because if that hole gets plugged, I think we have a far better chance of going forward, maybe through a breakaway or a very nice through ball, or who knows, maybe we even get a open play goal that's more than a breakaway or something like that.
yeah. I think again, I think it's interesting you say. Obviously, speaking about Carlos Vela, being a threat down the wings, is that a potential sort of thing where Jim Curtin sticks Leon Flack on the side that Vela's sort of down or attacking? Because Leon's obviously a much more defensive sort of centered player. Is he the man that you might like have sort of track Vela a bit? Following him around the pitch, personally, man marking him, and then it gives Kai more freedom to attack the wing as well, as opposed to having to worry about him overcommitting, knowing there's a big gap on the left.
It would be interesting, though. I think you and I can agree that Jim is a very stubborn man. Gosh, he hardly uses
Yeah,
his subs and he hardly deviates from his lineup. I think it took 2 games for Bedoya to thaw out from or a game for Bedoya to thaw out from the frozen San Jose game that I was at, when it was I think
mm.
like with the wind, it was I think it was like 1 degree outside, or maybe negatives. It was unbelievably cold.
Mm.
That's the only way that we were able to see someone else in there. I think it was Sullivan who started the next match, which
Yeah,
immediately made us far more dynamic. And I'll continue to toot the horn that Bedoya should not be playing all 90, but that's a different
no,
conversation altogether. Um, I don't know. I don't see Jim straying away from what has worked for him over the last 2-3 years. Though that would be an interesting tactic to go off of and see what he does. Though
yeah,
if it's not broke, don't fix it. They had a great game
yeah,
against, again, a very emotional Nashville. I just don't know if those tactics work at LA against
yeah.
LA.
I think again, I mean, as you said, Jim's sort of philosophy is if it's not broken, don't fix it. But if it is broken, allow it to fix itself. That's sort of his. He'll just even like I mean, we saw it last year. I mean, obviously Bedoya was he didn't have the best of spells during I think like the summertime. I think a couple of games that stand out was the Orlando game, and there was another game. I'm trying to think what it was. There was another game. There was two sort of games which really stood out where a lot of people were really calling for his head. I remember
Mm.
Mike sort of speaking to me, especially as well, saying like, yeah, like fans are calling for his head here. They think he shouldn't be nowhere near this team. He should be benched or whatever. Bedoya, obviously, again, I think he's come back. It's a testament to him as well this year how he's still able to last 9 minutes. I think he's come. I mean, yes, I think we'll both agree that this midfield and team is 100% more dynamic with only one of him and Flack in the team. But it's a testament to him because I think he's been a million times better this year than he was last year.
Sure, credit where it's due. He has been much better, and sure, there are some goals that you could argue he was just at the right place at the right time, and that's obviously something that is sometimes a gift that
Yeah,
players have, and they just don't realize it. But what he brings in leadership, I think, is very valuable. Though,
yeah,
again, when we're just far more dynamic than Bedoya, I feel like we're a completely different team, and we open up different situations that we don't otherwise. But
yeah,
I just don't know how well this goes if we are going to take an LAFC attack for all 90. I have a
yeah.
very hard time seeing that
I,
going 0-0, though kudos to the Union if they're able to walk out of
yeah,
there 0-0. Even more kudos if we're seeing them score a goal and walk out of there with a tie. I think that's going to
yeah,
be very, very tough. And Mike shares some odds with us. An LAFC win is at minus 175. Union win is plus 400, and a draw is plus 300. So LA heavy favorites here to go ahead and win this. So we shall see. It'll be interesting. We'll be up late. I'll be with a beverage or two trying to stay awake. Though frankly, those will probably put me to sleep since the little man wakes up at 6 a.m. the next morning.
I was going to say, obviously, it's going to be a tough game. I think, as you mentioned, like, can the way the Union, the players that they've got, the system they play, they're so one dimensional. If you know what I mean, they can only play narrow because they have no. I think again, obviously, everyone looked at Ilsinho as this. Even like early parts of last year and last couple of years, is this winger and this player out wide who can get you up the pitch. And realistically, he wasn't. He was a player. He was a player that you'd have to give the ball to in the final third to do anything. You couldn't give him the ball inside your own half and expect him to run 40 yards, get you up the pitch, win you a throw in or a corner. Do you know what I mean? And that's the player that this team lacks. And I constantly say it to Mike, and every week pretty much, this team lacks a plan B. Where, if they're getting absolutely slaughtered, they can't get themselves up the pitch. Fine, okay, we'll take Leon off. We'll go 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1 or whatever, and we'll just stick a pacey winger out wide who will, push one of their fullbacks back, and we'll give them the ball and allow them to run deep and try and cause some havoc. They haven't got that sort of player that can really cause a threat out wide or allows them to change things up a bit. I think that's, again, constantly, that's the one thing that sort of annoys me a bit, is sort of the stubbornness to change away from that system they like to play, the narrow sort of formations and narrow sort of systems and lineups they like to play.
Yeah, I would be interested to see some sort of formation where maybe, just maybe, if he's healthy enough, and I know he's on his way back, but a Sergio Santos, a player that just really stretches the field. What if he was to come in for a Bedoya? What if he was to come in for a Flock or switch sides with a Flock and Santos goes on the left side? It would be very interesting to see a player that can just literally eat miles off of that field a second with how pacey he is, and really just cause a lot of issues.
Yeah, I
I
think
would be so intrigued to see that.
again that's what this team just lacks so much of, is that, again, sort of, it's so just something a bit more sporadic, something a bit more, to add a bit more dynamic to this team, as opposed to we'll play central, we have central midfield players, and we'll only play with central midfield players. Jose Martinez plays as a right midfielder or right wing back for Venezuela.
Yeah.
So why doesn't he get the opportunity? Even then, he's a sort of and I constantly say it to Mike, he is the most, apart from obviously Daniel Gazdag, who is sort of out the three midfielders to sit deep, he is the most creative out the three. So why don't you give him a chance to sit at the 8 or go off and try his own thing, try and beat a few players? Because that's what ironically, that's what he does best when he's on the ball. He likes to take on a few players. He can get down the line. He can deliver across. Why not try that?
I actually would be intrigued. I think that's a wonderful observation. And in fact, I think I was watching the show last year and messaging you guys, or maybe mentioned it on a show I co-hosted too, where like, man, Martinez, that one game, I forget who it was. And Mike, I know you're in the back and you probably remember this, but Martinez had that beautiful round down the side. It was at Subaru Park because I remember the shadow just getting in the way. Had a beautiful run, beat a couple of players, crossed it, and we had a goal. I think it was even a Gazdag. Yeah, it was against Orlando. And he himself created this entire chance from even half the field, and Casper of all people scored, which you basically have to put that on a silver platter with a golden spoon for the man to score. And believe me, he's still up to his antics over at Chicago. So he's keeping up with his form out there. It would be interesting though, with the way that this game might go, being a defensive stronghold for the Union to create over there. I would see a world where Carranza comes off early from running so much during the first half after chasing, and just begging Corey Burke to hold the ball and earn a corner, and then we try to sneak away with a header. Just, not the most dynamic, but if we're able to just sneak a goal from a corner in the 85th minute, I think you and I would be thrilled, though that's not the way I would want this team to win.
I think as you sort of mentioned, like with the strikers, I think we can probably guarantee right now 2 subs will be obviously Burke for Carranza and one of Sullivan or Aronson for Uhre, and then the rest is just sort of a free hit as to who you think the subs will be. But I think again, with my point with Jose, it's not just obviously for this one game. I think it's going forward. I think we see it so often he likes to take risks, and he does. He takes. I'm not saying he hasn't got a bad footballing mind, but his footballing mind isn't as good as a player like Leon Flax, who he knows if he's outside the penalty area and he's got his back to goal, he's going to keep it simple. Or he's got his back, he's facing the goal, he's going to keep it simple. He'll either play it back, he'll just clear it, or whatever. Jose likes to try and turn, he likes to try and beat a man 20 yards out from goal. And we saw it in the Club America game in the CONCACAF Champions League, which was so costly last year, which is he lost the ball in the edge of the area.
Yeah.
And you could just see it happening. As soon as he lost the ball, shit, I need to go win it back. A reckless challenge inside the penalty area, gave away a stupid penalty, killed the tie off, giving the Union sort of a mountain to climb in the second leg. And it happens quite often. I think if you stick him out on the 8 for his own good and the team's good, he's more out the way. And, he can go off and do his own thing out wide, where he's not as likely to, cost a big, make a big mistake, which leaves the team wide open in the middle of the field. I think that's just sort of my personal sort of observation of Jose.
So then you suggest Leon falls back into the 6 and just plays sort of a Rodri, a Fabinho type of role, just clog it up and let Glesnes get the ball in a little bit type of situation. Is that kind of what you're suggesting? Because that to me makes a lot of sense.
More like a pivot sort of player,
yeah.
I think that's what they need, and that's in this sort of team. They just need a pivot sort of player. Then you have more creative freedom going forward. I mean, I know everyone hates it when Jose shoots, but I'm one of the biggest advocates for it when he does, because when you saw it, they're a lot more aggressive this year, but at times they were so timid last year. They didn't want to shoot. Players would get the ball around the penalty area. They'd pass it back. They'd go into little triangles before playing the ball out of play, or they'd lose the ball. They wouldn't shoot. They wouldn't cross. And Jose gets the ball and I was, he's shot. But if it bounces off someone else and goes in, or it forces the goalkeeper into a save, just to create something. You can win a corner, you can win a throw in a good position. Sometimes you need those sort of players. I think Jose, as good as he is in the 6, I think he'll be much better playing further forward, and it would also probably help Leon playing a bit deeper.
Credit where it's due. A lot of shots last weekend inside the box, and I think a couple from outside the box that were very speculative, but nonetheless to what you're talking about, right? The Philadelphia Union are not a Manchester City. They're not a Liverpool. They're not a tiki-taka Barcelona. They're not going to go to the end line and pass it in for a small tap-in by, an Uhre or anybody else. That's just not who they are. And if they are going to become that, I will, again, bite my arm off for something like that from the Philadelphia Union, but I just don't see that happening. So I don't know. It's very much a Jim call, and having been with Jim for as long as we have, I just don't see that happening, considering that Martinez is getting so much attention for being the best number 6 in the MLS. And I think it was earlier this week, Mr. Tom Bogert on Twitter once again solidified the rumors that both Martinez and Wagner were getting a lot of attention during the last transfer window, and he was quite surprised to not see one, if not both of them, go. So I think it is we're on a timer, really, to see both go. I don't think we keep one. I think they both go. We get that money, and that's where we figure out who's the next purchase and who's the next youth to come through. Obviously, Paxton being incredibly great, McGlynn being great too when he's had the opportunity to come in. But again, just credit where it's due with how they shot in Nashville, but also we gotta get the most out of Martinez while we still have him.
Yeah, I think that could be in the summer as well. I think the Union probably have 2 months before they maybe need to plan for a new left back and hold a midfielder. Because being realistic, if we saw that Kai was getting interest in our Liga teams and Premier League teams, that sort of money is going to be too good to turn down. They're going to have to accept the deal and, find that next diamond in the rough or the next hidden gem at left back. And, this will then bring me on to the Orlando game, because obviously we'll discuss Jesus Bueno in a minute. Then obviously to the Orlando game in midweek. I think it is a Wednesday game on Tuesday night / Wednesday. I'll be at work. Unfortunately. So that'll be a game for Mike to cover if he's all good. This game, I mean, if you're Jim, obviously, I know we're all going to be sitting here and expecting a win or whatever, but how many, or hoping coming off a good result against LAFC, how many how many changes do you make for this game? Is it a result dependent thing after LAFC? If they go out and beat LAFC, you're like, okay, fine, we'll go make 6 changes, 7 changes, and give everyone a rest? Or do you think if they get beat like 3-0, 3-1, Jim goes, screw it, we'll make 2 changes and we'll give these guys a chance to redeem himself? Or
I feel like Jim is the man who already has his plan in mind and he's set with it. I think he will obviously go with a very strong lineup against LAFC, the roster that we know and love. But I think Orlando will be a Matt Freese show. We'll have a Brandon Craig back. We'll have Paxton, McGlynn, Sullivan running the show. Corey Burke getting some minutes under his feet. Jesus Bueno, I think will be. I think it's going to be a Philadelphia Union 2 showing through and through. Does that make me happy? Absolutely. Does that make everybody happy? I don't believe so. I think that the Union were very close to winning that tournament a few times now. Very close, even at the doorstep of it, if I'm remembering correctly. Super producer Mike, I'm sure, can remind me of the year where they were at the finals of it, and I think it was against Seattle. But nonetheless, they've been very, very close to winning that tournament, though. I wonder if the players will approach this in a European way and the coaches will approach it in a European way, where this is the League Cup, right? This is the Carabao Cup, Dave, that you know so well over there, right? Where
Cup.
you know, this is where you give your backup keeper, and as they continue to go along, he will continue to play this game, ride or die till the end. So I'm intrigued. I think it's going to be a very different lineup, and Jim already has that in his mind, if not probably already communicated with the players about it.
I can imagine there'll probably be like 6 changes. I think looking through the team, I mean, again, we'll discuss Jesus Bueno in a minute, because if he's not going to either start the game or play 30, 35 minutes in this game, when the hell is he going to play? But yeah, obviously, I think for the Orlando game, I could probably see Matt Freese in goal. If I'm not, he obviously wasn't in the team in Nashville. I don't know if he's injured or if that was just not really sure. Obviously, I could probably see Matt Real coming in at left back, Olivier Mbazo starting the game at right back. I mean, he's got to play Stuart Finley. Otherwise, I think I could envision Stuart Finley demanding a transfer in the summer. If you go the first 3-4 months of the season without touching the field, what's your incentive to stay when you're arguably good enough to start for most MLS teams anyway? Right. I can imagine him leaving. If it happens, I think Jack McGlynn will get a start. Corey Burke will get a start, as will Quinn Sullivan, possibly. The only other ones, maybe Sergio Santos, depends if he's available for the game tomorrow night. If he's not, Jim said he'll likely play a part, so it could be him coming off the bench. But again, I think for you, sort of, how many changes can you see this team making? And if you were in charge, how many changes would you make, and sort of what players would you bring into the lineup?
All right, FIFA manager mode here. I would say you just clean up the entire lineup. This is a Matt Freese show. You have the exact 4 in the back that you mentioned. You have Jack McGlynn as that pivot, Sullivan and Paxton sort of running the middle, the wings, I should say, and Corey Burke. And I'd be intrigued. I think I would put Jesus Bueno up top and see what he can do. I mean, I know he's more of a midfielder who is creative, but ultimately he may have some wheels that he wants to show. And from the games I watched the Philadelphia Union 2 that Bueno has played in, he's done okay. He belongs at a higher level than Philadelphia Union 2. And, you and I, we're going to talk about it. But, really interested to see what's up with him. And I think, again, folklore type of legend, Stuart Finley, after that match against the NYCFC last year with the COVID match, as I call it, the asterisk game against them in the playoffs. Stuart Finley played incredible. Did a wonderful job. So he only deserves it. And I'm still, he's one of those head scratching purchases, whatever you want to call it, transfers that, man, had he just found his footing before an Elliott, who I think at one point or another we were thinking he was going to get transferred out after Trusty left. I don't know what it could have been or what it would have been at this point.
I think Finley's arguably the most is the biggest name that you'll probably will see in that team sheet. Again, I think he's good enough to play all start week in and week out for this team. I think he's shown it already, as you said, the NYCFC game where him and Collins stood strong for so long. And there was a testament to two players that barely played all season. I think, again, these are the sort of games that he is going to have to play. And if he wants to get extended game time this season, again, there's no CCL to, you know, sort of rotate the squad a bit, as well. You know what I mean? Like, you haven't got the big game on the Tuesday or Wednesday, so we're gonna rest Jacob, we're gonna rest, Nathan Harriel, Kai Bagley, we're gonna rest all these players for the bigger game on Tuesday or midweek. You haven't got that now, so this is their arguably the biggest chance, barring injury, to really make a standout. And obviously with Hedges Bueno, we look at the two loanies. I mean, again, he's only 20 years old. And everything we know stubborn Jim can be, but you look at the two January transfers, or sort of the two winter transfers last season, whenever they were, that, or there might have been summer transfers, whenever they were, that the team made on loan with Bueno and Davo, and just how poor they were, or they've turned out to be so far. We haven't really seen the impact on Bueno. Whether he is the heir apparent to Jose Martinez, we'll soon find out. But I mean, for you, if he doesn't manage to get any sustainable game time in this game, do you somewhat become concerned what his future in the team looks like?
Yeah,
Because
him and Stuart Finley, I would agree with you. Like
yeah,
those are two players. Stuart specifically, especially after that NYC game and the pressure on his shoulders and on his back during that game. I think he's proven himself to be an MLS player somewhere. Though something tells me, I follow him on social media, that he would probably want to go back to Europe, and that's totally fine.
yeah,
Bueno is a little different because the only playing time that he's really gotten has been kind of just appearances as a sub, and Philadelphia Union too, which both of those don't necessarily give you enough weight to be transferred to another MLS team. So I could see him going to a lower league in South America,
yeah,
maybe a lower league in Europe to, I'm talking like a third division league, maybe a fourth division league somewhere that he can get some playing time. But yeah, I'm perplexed about Bueno because all I've seen and game time, he looks good. It looks like he can do it. It's just the opportunities are tough, and we mentioned it before the podcast. If you can't crack that Philadelphia Union team, it's actually not a huge hit against you. If not, it's
no,
it's a huge hit about how good that team is,
yeah,
considering the players. Because he's not going to replace a Gostag, he's not going to replace a Martinez.
no,
Though it can't feel good as Jesus Bueno to see Paxton and Sullivan and Corey Burke get more playing time than you,
yeah,
considering that they are, and I know he's 20, but considering that these are 17, 18-year-old kids, and sure, age doesn't really matter in football, it still can't feel good when you were consider a pretty big transfer into the club that just did not pan out at this
no,
rate.
yeah. I think again, I think you look at it, maybe there is the concern, man. You've seen it in the last two holding midfielders they brought in with Orovich as well, and two players that haven't really been able to crack into the starting 11 on the first team, because we've seen it as well when Jose has perhaps missed game time, or if Jose was to miss game time, we know that Leon Flack will be playing at the six, and it'll be Jack McGlynn or it'll be Quinn Sullivan that starts ahead of him. So it wouldn't just be like a straight swap. Jim would rather reconfigure the midfield and then give him game time. So I think this Wednesday night game, I don't want to sound over dramatic, will be a big indication to see how far, how confident they are in the abilities of Jesus Bueno. Because again, there might be a reason to feel a bit concerned, or I don't know how to explain it, but is there a reason to be concerned in the scouting they have with that number six position? Because I think Jim probably alluded to himself. They fell on Jose Martinez by accident. Giving him that game time due to injury in the big LAFC game last time, and then Orovich has come in. He hasn't panned out at all. Um, he's been playing sexy football in the Union too, and in I think Slovenia where he's from. I think Slovenia where he's from. I mean, the recruitment of the holding midfield position has been great. I think obviously Leon Flack probably is the best holding midfielder out the four in terms of what you'd expect from a six, but he doesn't play there.
Yeah,
So
no, it'll
yeah,
be fascinating. I Yeah, and one last thing that I think leads me to believe that the Orlando game will be a brand new lineup, like maybe just 7 substitutions out of the 11, is the fact that they turn around and face Red Bulls at home the following
Yeah,
weekend. I think that's going to be an emotional game like it was for Nashville at Nashville. So I think even more of a okay, piecing it all together as you look at the week coming, starting tomorrow and ending on the 14th. I think Wednesday or Tuesday, I'm sorry, when they go to Orlando is going to be a big reset day for the guys and get their legs back, especially after all those miles in a plane.
yeah. I mean, that's gonna be the big one. I think, especially being able to get back into their own beds and the Red Bulls game, and just the comfort of being at home. That'll be big for the players. It'll be big for them mentally as well. So again, it's a huge week. Well, obviously, Jose, before we log off for tonight, we'll go for our score predictions for the game tomorrow. Who we think might score, lineup predictions. So first off, what's your score prediction?
I think, and I'm certainly a empty glass guy right now, but typically I'm a half empty type of guy. I think it's going to be, and Mike just typed it, super producer Mike just typed it. I actually think it's going to be a 2-0 LAFC win. I think Carlos Vela will put in too early, and then it's going to be a very tough defensive effort for the Union to hold on down 2. And I don't think that we'll really have a lot of chances. Again, Carlos Vela scores 2, and Union maybe get 2 corner kicks the entire match. I hope I'm entirely wrong and I look like an idiot, but I just don't see any way that the Union can do this after with everything that's coming down the week. I think they're going to be preoccupied, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think obviously Mike predicts 2-1 LAFC. I think this game will go one of two ways. I think we'll either see. Do you remember the game in DC last year when they scored that own goal and didn't get in the
Yeah.
DC half for the rest of the game? It'll either go like that, where I'm not going to say they'll score, but they'll play like that in terms of just get dominated the entire game, can't leave their half, or they'll produce a performance like they did in Atlanta for the CCL, or even like Nashville last week, a game like that. Well, they'll keep themselves in the game. They'll create chances every so often that will, or key chances. I think that will be the way the game goes. I think there will be a winner. I can't see the game being a draw. I think someone will come out of 3 points tomorrow.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think there's going to be a winner. I hope it's the Union, but I have a very
Well,
hard time seeing how we hold on for 90
yeah,
minutes, considering how little we keep possession during our matches this season. So Godspeed to
yeah,
the Union. Godspeed to Harriel, who's gonna he's gonna have a fun time going against Carlos Vela
yeah.
all night.
I think personally, I think again, I'll probably go 2-1 LAFC, but I could see maybe the Union maybe stealing at 1-0 if they somehow do, because they got the pace on the counter attack, they got the technical ability on the counter attack to catch teams out with the pace of Uhre and the footwork of players like Gazdag, and but I think LAFC will probably have too much for them, unfortunately, and it'll probably see the Union slide down the Eastern Conference just a little bit with Orlando and the Red Bulls, both having winnable games tomorrow. Orlando and Montreal, and the Red Bulls have got Portland. So again, 2 winnable games for both of them, which could see the Union obviously slide down the table a bit. But yeah, I think I'll go 2-1 on AFC, but I could see the Union coming out of there with a shithouse 1-0 win.
Before we sign off, Dave, I think it's something we need to mention. I know it's we're not a Seattle podcast, but kudos to Seattle for earning the first bid by an MLS team to the World Club Cup after winning the CONCACAF Champions League. Congratulations to Seattle. I think it's
Yeah.
as insufferable as their fans are. Credit needs to be given considering what that team achieved this year, something that we were very close to doing. Club America was obviously a different monster
Yeah.
that really showed us, how much we needed to grow. But congratulations to Seattle, an unbelievable achievement, and I really hope that they show the world in Qatar or wherever the World Club Cup is being hosted this year. I think it's going to be at
Yeah.
Qatar. I can't remember. That they show that the MLS teams can hang with some of these teams, because I, Dave, it's a reality. Seattle might be playing against Liverpool or Real Madrid. It's gonna happen.
Yeah,
It's weird to say, but it's going to happen.
it's crazy to see, obviously. But I think again, obviously, quickly before we go off, I think as you touched again earlier, if we'd have asked you 8 years ago, but obviously, the Union winning a Supporters Shield, competing at the top of the MLS, um, how would you have reacted if someone had told you the Philadelphia Union would be 2 games away from a CONCACAF Champions League final and playing in the Azteca in the first leg of a semi-final against Club America? I think, and no one would have believed anyone if they'd heard that sort of that phrase, that quote, like 8 years ago, even like 3, 4 years ago. I think everyone would have probably laughed it off. So I think it shows just how fantastically the Union have done to go from where they were at the start of the pandemic to how quickly they've developed and pushed on since then, and have ridden the wave of momentum, and they're doing their best to keep it going, because at some point it may come to a momentary halt, and it'll be how they react to that momentary halt which will define even the years after that.
To be fair, if you would have asked me 2 months ago or maybe a month ago, what I would have thought about Mbaizo potentially having to play against Neymar in the World Cup, with Cameroon and Brazil being drawn into the same group, I would have said, I don't believe a damn thing you're saying. But ultimately, that's where we are. And obviously, Mbaizo, outside looking in with Harriel really taking on
Yeah,
that job, I think that's maybe a name that we should keep an eye on for a potential transfer this summer,
I was going to
fully
say
knowing that he needs to find form before November.
maybe going to League One or League Two in the summer. Maybe, who knows? I mean, it could be a busier summer than we'd all anticipated for the Union. We could see 3 or 4 departures and the big needs to quickly replace them, with the league still going on whilst these transfers are happening. So I mean, it's going to be a big month and a half before that. But obviously, thank you all for tuning in, listening in tonight. And of course, thank you, Jose, for filling in for Mike as he battles on with his illness. It's fair to say we're not that confident for tomorrow, but who knows? The Union do sometimes do their best when everyone else is expecting the worst. So thank you all for tuning in this week. We'll be back hopefully next week, and go Union. Dupe.
Dupe, thank you so much for having me.
Nice.